Για τα φλέγοντα θέματα της παγκόσμιας ναυτιλίας, το NAFS βρέθηκε στο Λονδίνο για μια αποκλειστική συνέντευξη με τον Γενικό Γραμματέα του Διεθνούς Ναυτιλιακού Οργανισμού, κύριο Arsenio Dominguez, στις εγκαταστάσεις του οργανισμού. Ο κύριος Dominguez, ένας από τους πιο καταξιωμένους και ενημερωμένους παράγοντες του κλάδου, μοιράστηκε τις σκέψεις του για τα κρίσιμα θέματα που αντιμετωπίζει η παγκόσμια ναυτιλία. Συγκεκριμένα, αναφέρθηκε στους στόχους της απανθρακοποίησης, τα εναλλακτικά καύσιμα, τις νέες τεχνολογίες, την αειφορία και την κυβερνοασφάλεια. Ιδιαίτερη έμφαση έδωσε στους νέους κανονισμούς που προωθούνται από τον IMO για να διασφαλιστεί μια πιο πράσινη και ασφαλής ναυτιλιακή βιομηχανία. Η αποκλειστική συνέντευξη έφερε στο φως τις προσπάθειες του IMO να βελτιώσει τις παγκόσμιες ναυτιλιακές πρακτικές και να προωθήσει τη καινοτομία στον κλάδο. Με τον καθοριστικό ρόλο που διαδραματίζει ο Διεθνής Ναυτιλιακός Οργανισμός, οι δηλώσεις του Γενικού Γραμματέα προσφέρουν πολύτιμες γνώσεις και κατευθύνσεις για το μέλλον της ναυτιλίας. Η συνέντευξη αυτή θα είναι σύντομα διαθέσιμη στο NAFS και το nafs.tv.
Decarbonization goals. What are the IMO's long-term strategies for achieving the 2050 decarbonization targets, and how are member states being supported in this transition?
The 2023 IMO GHG strategy set up the pathway to decarbonization by around 2050. We already have in place operational and technical measures that have increased the efficiency of shipping, and these were introduced, entered into force back in 2013. So we already have a lot of experience on the actions that ship owners, ship operators can take in enhancing the efficiency of the vessels. Now, with the adoption of the strategy, we're in the process of development the technical and economic measures that are able to continue to support this transition and, of course, allow us to reach that goal. The first one is the technical measure, and it's a GHG fuel standard, and the second is an economic measure that will provide the assistance to member states as well as the sector in order to transition. What we've carried out is an impact assessment of the positives and negative impacts that these measures could have in shipping. And this was part of the discussions that we had at the last MEPC. In parallel to that, the organization works with several sectors, including the energy sector, as well as other UN agencies, in order to monitor the transition into the new technologies, the new alternative fuels that will be required. And at the same time, we have our own projects, research and developments, that continue to provide that support of information in order to make sound decisions by the member states. And the member states, as well as the intergovernmental organizations and non-governmental organizations, of course, are very much engaged and party to all the discussions. They drive the process. They bring the experience and expertise. And that's what makes IMO one organization that listens to everyone in the process.
Okay, let's say to the alternative fuels. How does the IMO plan to facilitate the adoption of alternative fuels such as hydrogen, ammonia, or biofuels in the maritime sector?
The research and development that it's been going on, as well as the different projects that we are engaged in, other projects outside IMO, have created a pathway towards the scaling up of these alternative fuels, as well as looking at the safety mechanism, the safety aspects, and any additional training that will be required for the seafarers and as well as port personnel in order to make this an equitable but also safe transition. The way that the organization is working is with the introductions of the technical measures as well as the economic measures, and they will provide this stimulus for the transition. I continue to call on the early movers to take the first steps. And we know that they will take some time. That's why I always refer to this as a transition. It may be repetitive, but it's important to highlight this. And the organization is following all the developments, including, for example, the reiteration at the COP in Azerbaijan that just finished over the weekend, where they again talked about and reiterated the decisions to transition away from fossil fuels. And it's this interaction with sectors like the energy sector that would allow us to understand the transition, the actions that have to be taken, and the role that the member states and the industry can also take.
Technological advancements. What role does the IMO see for emerging technologies like autonomous ships and AI in shaping the future of maritime operations?
Our regulatory process is there to enhance and incentivize the development of technologies. It's not there to hinder its process. Of course, we always need to look into what is right, what is required, and in particularly the end user, from the seafarers to the operators to the member states. And in this case, we have already started in advance, knowing that autonomous ships and further technological developments will have an impact in shipping, to develop the autonomous surface ships code. And this is in the process to be finalized for next year. And of course, we then move into the areas of learning for its implementation before we move into the second phase of this exercise, which is the mandatory process. And again, continue to enhance the industry and call on the industry and the member states to share the experience with organizations, because that makes a regulatory process better. AI provides a lot of support and a lot of information to make shipping more efficient and to enhance its credentials, from safety and green credentials. And there are certain actions that the organization have taken in relation to operational measures where AI could actually improve greater the efficiency of the ships. What I'm calling is for all those operators and ship owners to make use of those tools right now in order to demonstrate that this is possible before we actually start reaching all the different goals that we have set up in the strategy. Because there are ways to make progress. And when we talked about AI, sometimes we only focus on the technology, on the hardware, but there's a lot of software that exists there that will bring these efficiencies into the way that we operate. It's changing. It's looking for shipping to find better ways to operate and not doing the business the same way that we've been doing it for decades.
Regulatory evolution. How is the IMO adapting its regulatory framework to keep pace with rapid technological and environmental changes in the industry?
One of the main areas that we have introduced to keep a pace with technological development is goal-based standard approach. And this comes from the experience that we already have of regulating this organization in the sector for over 76 years. Now, that would allow us to keep pace with the technological development, but also keeping the required prescriptive approach, so the safety levels, the environmental requirements, the liabilities, and the training of the seafarers will continue to keep the high standards that we have been introducing. But we need also the exchange of this information, and we need to be always focused on what is required on the ship and what is not just nice to have. So the framework of the organization is evolving, the same way that we expect the shipping continues to evolve with us.
Global collaboration. What initiatives are in place to enhance global collaboration among member states to address common maritime challenges?
It's interesting to raise a question on global collaboration, because that's what IMO is all about. We are an organization that brings all the stakeholders together, including the member states, who makes the decision in all our regulatory process. That's what global collaboration is. And this is whenever I travel, whenever I speak to the media, whenever I speak to all the stakeholders in the organization, I called on the exchange of information, the sharing experience. And whenever we talked about cooperation and collaboration, I want everyone to focus on the actions that are taken and not just the statement, in how we actually collaborate. From my own perspective, is the constant engagement, is on the formal and informal meetings that we have, is listening to the concerns of the member states and all the participants in the meetings, and how we're going to address those concerns through regulations, through projects, through technical cooperation and assistance that we provide to the member states, through cooperations with other UN agencies and other sectors from where we can learn from, because everybody is facing the same challenges that we are. And this is part of the collaboratory framework that I would like everyone in shipping to be part of. But beyond IMO, we do it here. It's our role, it's our work, and we know how to do it. I want all the rest to also do the same thing.
Sustainability practices. How is the IMO promoting sustainable practices within the maritime industry, particularly in relation to ocean health and biodiversity?
We have several instruments that are promoting sustainability practices. Most of the attention tends to be on the greenhouse gas discussions of the organization, and we forget other instruments like ballast water management, the biofouling guidelines that we have, the fact that we're currently discussing underwater radiating noise in order to promote further conservation and sustainability of the oceans. The theme for IMO next year is our oceans, our commitment, our opportunities. And that highlights the role and the importance that we give to the area that we use to trade globally. Of course, is what everybody else also can do for IMO. We have introduced nearly 20 particularly sensitive sea areas around the world. We have special areas within the Environmental Convention, the MARPOL, and those continue to demonstrate how effective it has been in reducing oil pollutions if you compare it with the levels of the 90s, including in enhancing safety. But again, we know how to provide a leisure with sustainability. It's what the others can do as well with our regulatory process. The same way that we are engaging with the United Nations Environmental Assembly in the Global Plastic Treaty, which has already been regulated at IMO for more than 2 decades. Is that sharing of information where we continue to enhance our sustainability credentials, and it's not just within the greenhouse gas emissions and the safety and security aspects, it's all the other environmental protection measures that we have in place.
Cybersecurity. What measures is the IMO implementing to enhance cybersecurity across the global maritime network?
When it comes to cybersecurity, we know the risk of bringing new technologies, and we have been aware of that for some time. And the fact that we are developing a code on autonomous vessels and more AI being encouraged into the maritime sector, we recently, earlier this year, the Maritime Safety Committee approved the revised guidelines for cybersecurity. And now they have been sent to the facilitation committee that is going to look after them in relation to trade, in order to bring us in line to the enhancement of the measures that countries should put in place in order to face any cyber risk. We have seen the negative effects of cyber risks in big companies. IMO had a cyber attack back in 2020 and our systems went down. So we learned from it and the guidelines that exist outside. So as we develop the Maritime Autonomous Surface Ships Code, we're also enhancing the areas of cyber security, cyber awareness, and cyber protection.
Training and education. How is the IMO addressing the need for updated training and education programs to prepare the maritime workforce for future challenges?
From day one, I've highlighted the importance of the biggest asset that we have in this industry, and it is the seafarers, the people on board the ships that continue to operate day in, day out for everybody else's benefit, even though when they face global threats like the detrimental attacks to ships in the Red Sea, and how seafarers in particular are being negatively affected. And that's what I continue to call on everyone to do their utmost in order to bring this situation into control and of course bring trade back to its normal ways. But even during the decarbonization, we are working very closely with other entities. We are part of the Maritime Just Transition, where the main core asset is how we need to look into the more than 800,000 seafarers that are expected to be trained and qualified by the mid-30s in order to meet the decarbonization strategy. Through this collaboration with the International Labour Organization, the United Nations Global Compact, and the International Chamber of Shipping, we already have a strategic approach and a work plan in order to address these challenges. At the same time, our projects at the organization continues to enhance this engagement with, in particularly, labor supplying countries for them to take the necessary steps. And in parallel to all that, we're currently reviewing the SCCW Convention, the Framework Convention for the Certification, Training and Watchkeeping of Seafarers, and that will look also into the new training requirements for the alternative fuels and the new technologies that are being developed and are expected to be part of this decarbonization journey.
Economic impact. What is the IMO's perspective on the economic impact of new regulations on smaller shipping companies and developing nations?
We're always aware that our regulatory process, not just the green measures, have an economic impact. And our work is to carry out the necessary impact assessment in order to reach out an agreement and consensus on decisions where the impact is the least possible. But it's important to recognize that the decarbonization of shipping will have an economic impact. This is not going to happen for free. But there are many opportunities that arise for this in this process. And this is where we are tapping on those areas within particularly the developing countries for them to be part of this journey. The impact assessment that was carried out and presented to the Marine Environment Protection Committee at its last session just over a month ago provided all the analysis of the different scenarios from the technical and economic measures that they could have in relation to possible negative impacts on countries, on the fleet, and on trade. The United Nations Trade and Development Organization has carried out the impact assessment on our behalf. And even their maritime analysis has demonstrated that shipping will continue to increase and trade will continue to increase on the rations 2.4% between 2025 and 2029. And this is an annual increase, taking into account our regulatory process. And the technical and the economic measures will support the member states, in particular the economic measures, because here is where we can provide assistance to developing countries, starting with more island developing states and least developed countries. And all that has been taken into account, all the concerns and how the organization and the sector can support this transition. And of course, we don't forget the smaller ship owners that would also are part of this. And I call on those that can take the first steps, the early movers, to then share the information, the experience for the ones that may need more assistance, but also asking them not to be lagging behind, to find already ways to be part of the process, to start learning from the changes that are being introduced, and to ask the relevant questions for us to provide any further clarification that we could.
Crisis management. How is the IMO preparing the maritime industry to handle future global crises such as pandemics or geopolitical conflicts that could disrupt maritime trade?
Shipping has a very long-standing resilience tradition that has been demonstrated through many different challenges that it has faced. The most recent one was the COVID pandemic, and right now, the geopolitical situations affecting shipping trade both in the Black Sea and the Red Sea. Throughout the regulatory process, we have learned now how to work remotely, so the organization is prepared to continue its operations even when we face these difficult challenges like what we went through the pandemic. We're also working very closely with all the United Nations sectors as well as the industry and those that are operating as first hands and facing these challenges in the Red Sea and the Black Sea to see what other assistance and guidance we can provide. And it is noticeable that shipping finds a way to continue to operate in relations with assistance from others. We can see how in the EU, Operation Aspides is providing the necessary protection to ships in the region. This is not the only one. We have other countries that are also providing this because everybody recognizes how vital shipping is in relation to goods trading around the world. At the same time, we need to find ways to adapt to the unknown challenges. And one example is what is happening in the Red Sea, where ships and seafarers, of course, are not trained to deal with ballistic missiles or drone, which is the wrong way of utilizing modern technology. Having said that, we see how operationally, even though we continue to enhance and call for the freedom of navigation principle to be respected, There's operational measures that have been put in place, such as sailing around the Cape of Good Hope to continue to provide the necessary trade around the world. This is not ideal, and of course, increases the time of ships trading, the time of seafarers on board, more emissions, but it also demonstrates that when we are forced to take actions that are detrimental to the specifics steps that we're taking to be more sustainable, we can find the solutions, and they will be on the short term while we all sit down together and find the solutions in the areas and the organizations where they need to be addressed, so the situation can get de-escalated and we can go back to normal.
We would like to extend our sincere gratitude to His Excellency, the Secretary General of the International Maritime Organization, Mr. Arsenio Dominguez, for his warm hospitality at the IMO headquarters here in London, and for providing us with the opportunity to conduct this highly engaging and insightful interview. Thank you.
Thank you very much.